Before any mountain is conquered, it is first confronted in the mind. Victory is not granted to those who merely wish for it, but to those who prepare themselves inwardly to meet the challenge long before the climb begins. To rise above the rest is not simply to be seen as greater. It is to see more clearly, live more deeply, and walk more steadily. It is not about dominance, but about discipline, not about being admired, but about being unshakable in the face of uncertainty. To rise is not to tower over others in pride, but to stand tall within, unmoved by the chaos of the world. The Stoics knew that what separates the few from the many is not privilege, luck, or fame. It is not the circumstance of one's birth, nor the status of one's connections. It is the daily decision to govern oneself, to wrestle with vice, rather than befriend it, to pursue wisdom when folly would be easier, and to live by principle rather than by impulse. It is the ability to choose discomfort when comfort would dull the soul. They did not rise to greatness by chance. They did it by choice. Repeated difficult, uncelebrated choices made in private over time. To rise, the Stoic believed, was to align oneself with the natural order of things, to become immune, not to pain, but to the corruption of one's judgment by pain. In their view, greatness was not a matter of being followed, but of being fortified, of building an interior citadel that could not be stormed by criticism, failure, or flattery. In this video, we walk the path carved by the Stoics, who chose self-mastery over self-indulgence and clarity over confusion. They lived with a kind of inner sharpness, able to see through the noise of the crowd and into the truth of things they believed. The highest achievement in life is not applause, but alignment with nature, with reason, with virtue. And so this is not just a path to rise above others. It is the path to rise above your former self, to rise above the parts of you that once settled, once feared, once followed. Every chapter in this video is a step upward. Each one is both a challenge and an invitation, and each step asks one question: will you rise? Chapter 1: The Foundation of the Few. Mastering what you control. The beginning of every Stoic journey starts with a filter. What is within my control and what is not? Epictetus wrote, "There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." This is the first and perhaps most radical act of rebellion against the ordinary. While most of the world wastes their energy on outcomes, impressions, and uncontrollable circumstances, the Stoic sharpens their attention to what can truly be shaped: their thoughts, their choices, their character. This is not passivity. It is power. When you accept that the behavior of others, the weather, the past, and even your own reputation are outside your sphere of control, you stop being a victim, you stop being reactive. You begin to govern yourself like a wise ruler, investing where returns are guaranteed. Your inner state: most people drift like leaves in the wind. The Stoic roots themselves like a tree. Imagine a day where someone insults you, traffic delays you, and a plan falls apart. Do you fall apart too, or do you pause, breathe, and ask, is this within my control? The answer becomes your pivot point. Instead of cursing the wind, you adjust your sails. This is mastery in motion. Begin journaling each day with 2 columns. What is in your control today and what is not as situations arise? Return to this list. You will build the habit of discerning your effort from your ego, and from this rise, not through a single moment of reflection, but through the daily repetition of clarity. Over time, this process will train your mind to pause before reacting, to separate emotion from intention, and to act from a place of grounded principle rather than impulsive pride. This habit rewires your internal compass. It allows you to operate not from the shifting winds of opinion, but from a deep-rooted understanding of where your control truly lies. As this habit strengthens, you'll begin to spot more subtle moments of ego, how you argue to win instead of to learn, how you seek validation rather than inner approval, how you confuse performance with purpose. Each time you notice these tendencies and return to what is essential, you are building a higher version of yourself from this practice. Rise. Not once, but always. Chapter 2: Endurance over ease. The quiet strength of persistence. We live in a culture that glorifies the shortcut and rewards the visible victory. But the Stoics placed their honor not in outcomes, but in effort. They believed greatness is forged in the furnace of repeated trials, not in the comfort of ease. Seneca reminds us difficulty strengthens the mind as labor does the body to rise above the rest. One must endure what others escape. The Stoic does not seek pain, but does not flee it either. They welcome adversity not with joy, but with readiness, with a posture of preparedness that transforms affliction into instruction. Pain to the Stoic is not a punishment. It is a purifier. It strips away illusion, weakens attachment to luxury, and brings the soul face to face with its own strength. Adversity clarifies. It humbles and it reveals who we are beneath our comforts. They do not romanticize hardship, but they respect its power to refine and its ability to awaken clarity where comfort has dulled perception. The Stoic knows that comfort creates stagnation. While struggle stirs, the soul struggle draws out what is real. It burns away the excess and brings forth the essence. The obstacle is not a detour. It is the way. Every hardship contains hidden instructions, often invisible to the frantic or the untrained. It teaches patience when we are restless, tenacity when we feel frail, humility when we crave pride, and grace under pressure. When the world demands reaction, these are not just abstract virtues. They are living skills forged through the heat of experience. Every moment of discomfort is a summons to develop inner strength, a signal to rise and confront the version of ourselves that once chose escape, that once compromised under pressure, that once feared the cost of courage to persist when quitting would be easy. To hold one's ground when the winds of emotion or fatigue tempt retreat is to engage in the deepest form of strength. It is not glamorous. It is often silent. No fanfare, no audience, just you and the threshold. You refuse to cross backward. This strength does not require applause because it is witnessed in solitude. Endurance is not just surviving. It is thriving with dignity. In the midst of struggle, it is choosing to move forward, not because circumstances improve, but because you've chosen who you will be regardless of circumstances. It is a commitment to walk through fire without letting it harden your heart. The Stoic walks into the storm with composure, not because they are immune to fear or pain, but because they have trained their mind to outlast it. They have rehearsed hardship, envisioned loss, accepted misfortune, not with defeat, but with readiness. This preparation becomes armor for the soul. They understand that pain is a moment, but how we carry it can shape a lifetime. Pain may carve into the day, but it does not have to carve into the soul. In fact, it often chisels the soul into something deeper, wiser, more anchored. They remember that pain is temporary, virtue is not. While the body may ache, the soul remains sovereign. While the day may darken, their purpose remains lit, while others surrender to the weight of the moment. The Stoic rises beneath it, not by pretending it is light, but by becoming stronger. They do not resist the weight, they grow under it. This is how one endures, not just with stubbornness, but with sacred strength, born from alignment with what is true, what is right, and what is worth enduring for. And in that alignment, they discover the rarest kind of power, the power to continue even when nothing around them offers permission to do so. Identify one area of your life where you have been avoiding discomfort. It could be physical, emotional, spiritual, or relational. Ask yourself honestly, where have you settled for avoidance over action? What are you silently tolerating that is holding back your growth? Bring that discomfort to light. Instead of escaping it, face it directly. Sit with the tension it brings. Acknowledge the resistance, understand its roots, then take one step forward. Choose a specific, measurable goal of consistency, whether it is working out daily, confronting a fear you've long ignored, initiating a difficult conversation, waking up earlier to build discipline, or creating boundaries that protect your time and energy. Let the goal be clear and attainable, but also meaningful enough to challenge you. Once identified, create a structured plan. Define what success looks like each day and what obstacles you may encounter. Commit to the plan, not just in your mind, but on paper. Write it out. Set reminders and carve out time daily to engage with it. Document your progress journal. Not only the wins, but the days you struggled and still showed up. These are often your most powerful victories. Reflect on what you learn through the process, noting how your internal resistance begins to weaken, not overnight, but gradually. With each repetition of effort, as you track the days you persist, even if imperfectly, you build a record of resilience. Understand that the process of showing up in discomfort is not just about the goal itself. It is about reinforcing the identity of someone who refuses to be ruled by avoidance. It is in those moments when you want to quit, but don't when you fear, but act when you fail, but return, that transformation takes root. These aren't just events. They are the thresholds where your old limitations are dissolved, where the scaffolding of who you used to be falls away to make room for who you are becoming. These are the turning points of character, the crucibles that refine you when no one is watching and no one is applauding. It's in the quiet, determined act of trying again that the soul is fortified. This is how confidence is built. Not through ease, but through consistent confrontation with discomfort. Not through artificial affirmations, but through hard-earned self-trust. Each test becomes another layer of inner strength. Each setback you rise from is proof that you are more resilient than you once believed. The habit of persistence transforms effort into identity, struggle into structure over time. This practice becomes part of who you are. It integrates into your responses, into your posture, into the way you carry yourself. Even in uncertainty, you no longer need external motivation because you've begun to trust in your ability to endure what once crushed you. You don't just believe in your strength. You've proven it to yourself through trial. Each day you persist. You rise not only above the discomfort, but above the weaker self that once ruled you. You break free from the cycles that once confined you. And the more you rise, the more that self becomes a memory rather than a master. A shadow of the person who once thought struggle was the end rather than the beginning of transformation. Chapter 3: Inner Wealth: Building Unshakable Character to Truly Rise. You must build something that the world cannot steal. Your character, Marcus Aurelius said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one while others chase status, recognition, and power. The Stoic focus is inward. They know that possessions rust, titles fade, and opinions shift, but virtue is the only true wealth: courage, justice, temperance, wisdom. These are not abstract ideals. They are daily practices, daily tests, daily invitations to either rise or retreat. The Stoics did not treat these virtues as intellectual ornaments, but as the living architecture of the soul. Do you speak the truth when lying would benefit you? Do you choose restraint when anger tempts you? Do you seek justice when silence would be safer? Do you show patience when frustration is screaming for expression? Do you prioritize wisdom when ignorance is easier and faster? These questions refine the soul, not because they are simple, but because they force us to wrestle with ourselves in moments that matter. Virtue is not built in theory. It is built in friction. It is shaped in struggle, sharpened in silence, and strengthened through repetition. It is not revealed in speeches, but in self-control. It is not found in applause, but in private moments when no one is watching, and the only reward is self-respect. Virtue is born in restraint. When the easy path would compromise your integrity, it is built each time you pause before speaking, each time you act with justice. When it would be easier to ignore wrong, each time you hold to principle in the presence of pressure. The Stoic does not merely admire virtue. They live it even when it hurts, even when no one else sees. When you begin to live aligned with these virtues, you discover a kind of power that is not about influence over others, but invincibility within. This inner strength becomes your foundation. Unshakable, unmoved, unbothered by external chaos. It is the armor that cannot be taken, the wealth that cannot be stolen, the voice that cannot be silenced. You begin to move through the world with a quiet certainty. You act not from reaction, but from values. You speak not for approval, but for truth. You choose not for ease, but for honor in a world that often mistakes convenience for success and popularity for truth. The person who walks in virtue becomes rare, and in that rarity they rise. To live this way is to create your own compass. One that does not spin wildly with the winds of culture or trend, but one that points always to what is right. It means having the courage to be misunderstood, to be overlooked, to be opposed, and still walk forward without compromise. It demands that you abandon the craving to fit in and embrace the weight of walking alone if truth requires it. It means showing restraint when it would be easier to rage, patience when it would be simpler to lash out, and integrity when cutting corners would reward you faster. It calls for endurance in the invisible tests when no one is watching and still you choose. Honor this kind of character. Slowly and stubbornly built forms a core of steel wrapped in quiet grace. It turns daily moments into proving grounds for the soul. Each time you hold your tongue when ego wants to speak, each time you take the higher road when no one is looking, you hammer another layer onto the anvil of integrity. It is not perfection. The Stoic seeks but progress toward wholeness, toward being the same person in silence as they are in the spotlight. They seek to be inwardly clean, even if outwardly questioned. When your character is whole, life cannot break you. It can only reveal you. Misfortune becomes a mirror reflecting not what you pretend to be, but what you truly are. Hardship becomes a clarifier, stripping away illusion and exposing depth. You find yourself surprised at your own resilience, not because you've never been tested, but because your values have survived the testing. It cannot take from you what you have built inside. It cannot rattle the foundation if the foundation is virtue. Even if your body is harmed, your reputation slandered, your comfort disrupted, your essence remains untouched. You will lose many things in life: status, health, possessions, approval, but virtue once truly formed is one thing. No loss can reach. It remains. It echoes through every action, and its light cannot be dimmed by darkness. The Stoic lives in a way that even in misfortune they can say, "This may harm my body or status, but not my integrity." They understand that true strength is not in the absence of hardship, but in the ability to remain whole through it, and that is the ground. They never surrender. That is the strength. They never negotiate. It is not merely an act of stubbornness. It is a sacred commitment to principle that is the treasure they protect above all else. Knowing it is the only possession that cannot be taken, only surrendered. That is how they rise. By anchoring themselves in what no storm can sweep away, they plant their roots deep into the soil of virtue, so that no matter how fierce the winds of circumstance blow, they do not topple. Instead, they endure, and more than endure, they grow stronger. They transform hardship into fuel loss, into insight, and challenge into growth. In doing so, they become the type of person no storm can destroy. Not because the storm never reaches them, but because their soul is built like a fortress crafted brick by brick. With the mortar of daily practice and mindful resilience, they do not pray for easier conditions, but for stronger character. They do not ask for the seas to calm, but to become skilled sailors. They are not shaken by the shifting tides of approval or fortune, because their sense of worth does not rest on what is fleeting. They do not count wins by metrics of the world, but by the quiet victories of remaining whole in a world that seeks to fracture. Each time they choose virtue over ease, stillness over reaction, and truth over comfort. They are shaping a legacy that cannot be measured in applause, but will echo in the soul. They know that storms do not only test structures, they reveal architects. They unveil whether the foundation was real or only an illusion held together by convenience. And in this stormy world, the Stoic is one who has built something no wind can blow down. Their house is not made of cards, but of character. Their walls are not built from ego, but from effort. This is why they rise not above others, but above the self that once bowed to circumstance, and in doing so become a living monument to what virtue can withstand. They do not need to be praised for this, because the reward is already within the quiet, unshakable knowledge that they have become who they were meant to be. Pick one Stoic virtue and make it your daily anchor. Let it become your lens, your compass, your standard. Choose something that both inspires and challenges you. A virtue where you know growth is possible and needed for 1 month. Make this virtue the theme of your reflection, intention, and action. Begin each morning by setting a goal related to it. Carry that virtue with you into your conversations, your work, and your silence. End each day by reflecting, did I embody this virtue today? Where did I fall short? Where did I stand firm? Whether it is truthfulness, patience, or generosity, treat each day as an experiment in alignment. You may find that your awareness sharpens, that you pause before speaking because you remember your commitment to truth, that you breathe through frustration because you are anchored in patience, that you offer kindness when it costs you something because you are training generosity. Notice the small victories, celebrate when you choose the harder right over the easier wrong. And just as importantly, notice the moments where you fall short, not with shame, but with curiosity. These stumbles are not failures, they are feedback. They point to where your discipline is still growing. They show you where the old self still tries to assert control, and then rise again, recommit, keep going. Over time, you'll begin to notice a shift, not only in your actions but in your identity. You will not just practice the virtue, you will begin to become it. This is how the soul is shaped, not in sudden transformations, but in small repeat choices that echo with integrity. This is how you build a life that can withstand storms and inspire others, not by accident, but by anchoring in virtue until it defines you. Chapter 4: Purpose over Popularity, Living for What Matters Most. Popularity is the currency of the crowd. Purpose is the compass of the Stoic. Too many live by external validation, adjusting their values like chameleons to fit the moment. But to rise, you must stop performing and stop pursuing. You must live for something that cannot be applauded into or out of existence. Marcus Aurelius asked himself daily, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change. For I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." That is the voice of someone who follows purpose over praise, someone who values personal evolution over public approval. He was not concerned with appearing right, but with becoming right. He did not seek validation from others, but alignment with reality. That distinction is the foundation of living a principled life. Purpose is found not in noise, but in silence, in solitude, when the opinions of others fade and the distractions fall quiet. We are left with the raw material of who we are and who we are becoming. This is the terrain of authenticity, a place where masks fall away and only our truest intentions remain in the stillness. The performance stops and we hear the subtle but honest questions that shape the architecture of our inner world. We ask questions that the world rarely gives us time to ponder: what truly matters to me, not to my peers, not to my followers, not to my past self, but to the core of my being. What am I willing to suffer for, to sacrifice for, to stand alone for if necessary? What would I pursue if no one ever clapped for it? And what will I regret not doing if my life ends tomorrow? Not someday, not years from now, but tomorrow. These are not comfortable questions. They do not offer quick answers. They are not designed for convenience. They peel away the layers of distraction and force confrontation with our neglected convictions. They demand honesty that often aches. They challenge the carefully constructed image we present to the world and invite us to examine whether we have confused motion with meaning. And yet from this ache, a deeper kind of clarity begins to rise. The fog begins to lift. The noise thins out, and in the quiet we start to see the outlines of a path we've ignored. Sometimes for years we start to realize that much of our striving has been for things that will never satisfy, that our ambition has been borrowed, and that our soul has been quietly whispering a different direction all along. That's why few ask them. Because once you ask them, you cannot unhear their echoes. These questions follow you everywhere, into the workplace, into relationships, into your habits and your quiet moments. They whisper during your commute, interrupt your scrolling and reframe your ambitions. You cannot return to drifting. Once you have glimpsed the direction, that glimpse becomes a haunting and a compass. The old life ruled by reaction and reward begins to feel hollow. No matter how polished it looks from the outside, it becomes difficult to pretend you don't see the emptiness in endless hustle or the cost of applause that comes at the expense of your soul. And that hollowness is a gift. It signals the beginning of a new chapter, a deeper alignment, a reorientation from noise to necessity, from popularity to purpose, from surface to substance. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough at first. It feels like disorientation, like a pulling away from what used to satisfy. But beneath that discomfort is clarity. Being born, it invites the death of the performance and the birth of a life that feels deeply lived, a life that feels rooted instead of restless. A life where each day has weight, not just motion, but those who do ask and truly listen begin to rise. They begin to filter their decisions through meaning rather than momentum. They begin to weigh opportunities, not by the size of the platform, but by the size of their purpose. They begin to examine their motivations and ask, does this align with who I truly want to become? They learn to distinguish between movement and direction, between applause and authenticity, between what feels urgent and what is ultimately important. They start saying no to the loudest voices, so they can hear the quiet truth inside themselves. They let go of busyness and reach for depth. Knowing that depth is rare and what is rare is valuable, they begin shaping a life not around applause but around purpose. They reorder their priorities from the inside out. They stop outsourcing their direction to trends and tune into timeless truth. They choose stillness over stimulation, integrity over imitation, intention over impulse. They let silence speak. They let discomfort refine. They understand that noise fades but meaning remains. And that kind of life, though often quieter, always stands taller. It becomes a beacon, not through volume, but through consistency. It may not trend, but it endures. It may not always be seen, but it is always felt deep within where it matters most. It is not praised in headlines, but it is remembered in legacy. It is not about being followed. It is about walking the path. Even if you walk it alone, that is purpose. That is power. Set aside 1 hour this week to disconnect from all noise. Write down your answers to the 3 questions above. From this list, extract one principle or mission. Let this guide your decisions for the next 30 days. Watch how clarity becomes your elevation. Chapter 5: Emotional Mastery. Staying calm in chaos. Emotions are not enemies, they are messengers. But when left unexamined, they become tyrants. To rise above the rest, you must rise above your mood. The Stoics train daily to remain steady, not by suppressing emotion, but by understanding it. Seneca taught that anger is not just a flash of fire. It is a failure of preparation. It is the result of unrealistic expectations crashing into the unpredictability of life. When you expect the world to be fair, easy, or convenient, every disruption becomes an insult. Every inconvenience feels personal, but when you expect adversity, when you rehearse difficulty in your mind before it arrives, you meet it with calm, you approach the storm not with surprise, but with steadiness. You disarm it by refusing to be provoked, by understanding that your response is always your domain. Even when everything else falls beyond it, this is not denial. It is dominance of self. It is a cultivated form of sovereignty, built through repetition and reflection, where one becomes captain of the inner ship rather than a passenger tossed by every wave of feeling. To prepare for hardship is not to become cynical, but to become centered. It is to root yourself so deeply in clarity that chaos cannot uproot you. It is to train your mind not in fear, but in forethought, not in avoidance, but in awareness. You learn to anticipate disruption, not as a threat, but as an inevitable invitation to demonstrate composure, to know that difficulty is a certainty, and to build your inner world accordingly is not pessimism. It is wisdom lived. The Stoic equips themselves not to avoid conflict, but to remain whole within it. They understand that peace is not the absence of disturbance, but the presence of steadiness within it. While others are thrown off course by criticism or delay, the Stoic remains anchored because their expectations are grounded in reality, not fantasy. They recognize that the most powerful person in any room is not the loudest, it is the calmest. It is the one who refuses to escalate simply because everyone else is unraveling. Calm is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is a discipline born not from detachment, but from deep engagement with one's inner world. It is forged in the fires of past storms, in the hours when you chose restraint over reaction, patience over provocation, and reflection over retaliation. Calm is not a gift, it is a craft. It is strengthened through the deliberate practice of stillness and the discipline of deliberate thought. This strength is cultivated day by day, situation by situation, through the often invisible decision to hold your ground inwardly when chaos tries to pull you off center. It is the result of consistent training of the mind and discipline of the heart. Calm does not mean the absence of emotion. It means emotion without erosion. It is the steady flame that does not flicker when wind rattles the windows. It is built through meditation, self-examination, and the relentless pursuit of self-awareness. It is the fruit of 1,000 quiet moments where you choose reflection instead of reaction. Calm is not learned in theory. It is earned in practice. The Stoic does not shout in conflict. They inquire. They do not panic. In uncertainty, they reflect. They do not inflate the drama. They neutralize it by staying grounded. They ask questions instead of casting blame. They seek understanding over accusation. They pause, assess, and then act with intention, not impulse. They turn delay into space, insult into insight, and pressure into practice. They hold the emotional line when the world pulls hard at their patience. recognizing that composure is not compliance, it is conscious power. Their emotions serve reason, not the reverse. Emotion is acknowledged, understood, and then guided. Not suppressed, but directed by a higher principle, like a river channeled into a turbine. Emotion fuels clarity. When harnessed, the Stoic sees emotion not as something to erase, but as energy to be refined. Anger becomes assertiveness without cruelty. Fear becomes caution without paralysis. It becomes the raw material for wisdom, not a force of sabotage. This is not apathy, it is mastery. It is presence. It is the art of remaining unmoved. Not because you don't feel, but because you've learned to feel without losing clarity. You can feel grief without breaking. You can feel pressure without panicking. You can feel chaos and still choose your next move deliberately. And it allows them to stand unshaken even when the world around them trembles. When the winds howl and the storms rage, they do not falter. They breathe, think, and rise. Their calm becomes a kind of lighthouse, a guidepost not just for themselves, but for others. Lost in the storm, the next time you feel anger, anxiety, or sadness rise, do not act. Pause. Write down exactly what you are feeling and what story you are telling yourself. Ask, is this true? Is this useful? Replace reaction with reflection. This is the art of emotional elevation. Chapter 6: The Power of Presence. Winning the moment before it begins to rise above the rest is not to outpace the world, but to outpresence it. In a society that equates speed with success, the Stoic slows down while others race toward achievement. The Stoic plants himself firmly in the now because victory is not only earned in outcomes, it is secured in presence. The Stoics practiced what modern science now confirms. Your awareness is your superpower. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." He did not mean this as escapism. He meant it as power. Your strength, your composure, your clarity all begin where your feet are. Presence is where you notice your thoughts before they become habits. It's where you catch your tone before you say something you regret. It's where you breathe instead of break. It's where you pause just long enough to choose a wiser response rather than default to an old one. And it's where you prepare, not in haste, but with purpose, with the kind of clarity that only comes from slowing down in presence. We reclaim the moment from the swirl of our inner narratives. Most people lose the moment before they even arrive in it because they're lost in rehearsals for futures that haven't happened or regrets from pasts they cannot change. They become spectators in their own lives, consumed by imaginary outcomes, while the real moment slips quietly past. But presence is a kind of power that multiplies. It is where we actually live, not just pass through. It is where effort becomes focused, where words carry more meaning. And where decisions are made with greater precision. To be present is to become intimate with reality. To say, this is where I am, this is what I can do, and this is enough. It's not always easy. It takes training. It takes the willingness to endure the discomfort of stillness when distraction would be easier. But what you gain in return is agency, sovereignty over your reactions, and the grace to meet life as it unfolds, not as you fear it or fantasize it. The Stoic remains here, anchored, rooted, not in resignation, but in intention. Grounded not by force, but by clarity. Not because they lack ambition, but because they know ambition without presence is a scattered storm. Chaotic, unchanneled, ultimately exhausting. They understand that to chase endlessly after the horizon while neglecting the terrain beneath your feet is to sacrifice the only real leverage you have. The Stoic knows that the mind chasing future triumphs often overlooks the raw shaping power that exists in this single moment. And so they choose to stand still, not in stagnation, but in strength. They understand that greatness is not manufactured through frantic activity, but is cultivated in quiet precision, that the most powerful choices are often the smallest ones made when no one is watching, grounded in values no one else sees. The Stoic breathes deeply into now, trusting that this breath well lived leads to the next breath well earned. They engage fully with the task at hand, no matter how mundane, because they know it is the soil in which consistency and character grow. They understand that tomorrow is born out of this breath, this step, this decision. The future does not arrive whole. It emerges one choice at a time, formed by the accumulated momentum of deliberate presence. The person who learns to meet the moment with full attention crafts a future worth inhabiting. Each moment you claim with clarity shapes a future you will not have to regret each second spent. Grounded is one more brick in the foundation of a life you can respect. The Stoic knows this, and so while others drift distracted and detached, the Stoic builds thought by thought, act by act, the architecture of meaning. They do not escape into the illusion of later. They act within the truth of now. They reject the false security of delay and face the sacred demand of the moment. They refuse the seduction of someday and replace it with a discipline of today. They understand that later is a lie. Comfort tells us to avoid action, that procrastination wears the mask of patience, but bleeds purpose, but truth lives in the now, in the small act. In the quiet resolve, in the mindful presence of someone who knows this moment is enough, and this moment is everything. To be here fully is not just a gift. It is the way forward, the way through, and the way up. Every hour, pause and take one breath with full attention. Ask, where am I? What am I feeling? What is mine to do? Right now. Train your presence like a muscle, because the future you want will be built not in tomorrow, but in this very breath. Chapter 7: Detachment, not indifference, letting go without giving up. One of the greatest misunderstandings of Stoicism is that it promotes emotional numbness, but the Stoic is not indifferent. They care deeply. They simply refuse to be owned by outcomes. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the mastery of direction. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." And so the Stoic practices letting go not of effort, but of entitlement. They act with full devotion, but without demanding the result. They commit fully, love freely, work diligently, and then release. They do not let their peace hang on what is not theirs to control. This gives them an almost unexplainable power, one that radiates not from dominance, but from liberation, because they are unattached to outcome. They move with freedom, not hesitating or second-guessing their path based on whether or not they will succeed. They do not need the future to comply with their preferences in order to remain steady. They plant effort in the soil of integrity, and they leave results to nature, because they are unattached to praise. They speak with truth, unfiltered and unpolished by the hunger to be liked. They are not puppets pulled by the strings of approval. They say what is right, not what is popular. Their words carry weight because they are born of principle, not performance, because they are unattached to fear. They act with courage, not because they feel no fear, but because fear no longer decides for them. Their sense of direction is governed by value, not vulnerability. They do not seek comfort. They seek clarity, and that clarity gives them the audacity to move forward. Even into the unknown. Detachment doesn't make them numb, it makes them unstoppable. Notice today where your peace is hooked to something outside of you. Recognition, outcome, approval, gently unhook. Remind yourself, I control the input, not the outcome. Return to your task. That's where your power lives. Chapter 8. Stillness is the standard. Slowing down to level up. Stillness is not stagnation. It is strength. It is not doing nothing. It is doing the right thing at the right pace. The Stoics knew that silence is where decisions mature. That quiet is where courage sharpens. In a world sprinting nowhere, the Stoic walks with intent. They do not rush to fill silence with noise. They do not run from solitude. They use it. They listen in it. They grow in it. Solitude is not their burden. It is their sanctuary. In that space, the Stoic finds clarity, untouched by the chaos of crowds, and strength that isn't dependent on applause. Marcus Aurelius found time, even as emperor, to sit and reflect, not because he was idle, but because he understood. If you cannot be still, you cannot be wise. If you cannot quiet your mind, you cannot hear what truly matters. Stillness is not an escape from action. It is a refinement of it. It is not about inactivity. It is about calibrated effort. It is where movement becomes meaningful and intention filters noise. In stillness, you reclaim the space to weigh your motives. Without the pressure of performance, you reconnect with why you act, not just how. You realign your intentions with values rather than vanity. And you begin to hear the wisdom beneath the noise, the subtle signals that ambition and anxiety often drown out. Stillness allows the smoke to clear so that the path appears when the world demands speed. Stillness chooses substance when others rush to decide. Stillness waits to understand. It gives you the space to observe your patterns, question yours, and reset your course. Before momentum hardens into misdirection, it gives shape to thought and substance to intuition. In the quiet, you become your own advisor, consulting not with fear or ego, but with truth. It restores vision. Where frenzy breeds blindness, it clears the fog of urgency and reveals what is essential. It stops the compulsion to react so you can respond with clarity. You no longer trade control for convenience. You hold your position with dignity. It slows the pulse of panic and allows principle to take the lead, bringing grace to pressure and courage to uncertainty. It brings your heart and mind back into rhythm. Stillness gives you back the one thing most people abandon too quickly. Your judgment, not reaction, not instinct, but judgment deliberate. Calm earned, and from judgment everything else flows. Your timing, your tone, your tenacity, your resilience, all of it is sharpened in the crucible of stillness, where the noise dies down and the truth of who you are and who you must become has room to speak. Schedule 10 minutes a day for pure stillness. No phone, no stimulation, just breathe and thought. Let it become your edge, not your escape. Chapter 9, Self-Respect Over Approval, Living by the Inner Scorecard. To rise above the rest, you must choose the long path. The path where self-respect matters more than public approval. The Stoic does not live to impress. They live to express what is right. Seneca said, "What progress have I made? I am beginning to be my own friend." This is the Stoic aim, to become someone you respect in solitude, not someone who is only praised in public. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you erode your integrity. You teach yourself that your boundaries are negotiable, that your truth can be silenced for the sake of comfort. Every time you follow the crowd against your better judgment, you weaken your soul, because deep down, a part of you knows you are betraying what you stand for. That fracture inside doesn't scream, but it lingers. It shows up as quiet unrest, as moments of doubt, as a subtle misalignment between who you are and how you act. But every time you choose your values over validation, you strengthen your center. You declare that your character is not for sale, and that your compass will not spin to please the masses. This alignment builds trust, not with others, but with yourself, and that kind of trust is rare, resilient, and powerful. This is how you walk with calm, not from a lack of pressure, but from a surplus of clarity. This is how you lead with conviction, not because it's always easy, but because it's always true, not by chasing approval, but by becoming undeniable, unshakable, rooted in a way of living that does not waver when the spotlight fades, because it was never built for show. It was built for truth. Write down one decision you are making this week that is true to your values, but might go unnoticed or be misunderstood. It could be choosing honesty in a conversation where silence would be easier, setting a boundary that others may not appreciate, or sticking to a promise you made to yourself, even though no one is watching. Whatever it is, make it count. Let it reflect your principles, not your need for praise. Then do it. Do it without explanation, without apology, and without waiting for applause. Let your actions echo in the space between who you are and who you are becoming. Understand that the reward is not in recognition, but in resonance with your own spirit. The feeling of alignment is subtle but profound. It creates a quiet confidence that does not shout, but holds firm. It becomes your compass when the world is confusing, your strength when approval is absent, and your peace when results are slow. Your reward is internal alignment, and that's worth everything. It's how you become someone who rises quietly, consistently, and undeniably above the rest. Chapter 10, Rise Again. The Final Ascent. This is not a one-time journey. To rise is not an event. It is a rhythm, a return, a daily ascent. You will fall, you will forget. But the Stoic does not measure their life by how few times they stumble, but by how quickly they rise again. The impediment to action advances action, said Marcus Aurelius. What stands in the way becomes the way. And so we rise, not because we are immune to failure, but because we are loyal to growth. The climb never ends. There is no final plateau where effort becomes unnecessary or challenges cease to appear. Each level only reveals another ridge, another lesson, another test of strength. The summit is not out there. It is inside you. It is not marked by fanfare or external milestones, but by the refinement of character, the sharpening of focus, and the deepening of discipline. It is who you become through the climb, through the effort, through the resistance you refuse to retreat from, and through the refusal to let hardship shape your soul into bitterness. Even pain, when embraced with purpose, becomes a forge. You will be tested by failure, by fatigue, by the quiet temptation to give up, and by the subtle whispers of doubt that question your worth. In moments of solitude, there will be days when the weight of your calling feels too heavy, when no one is watching and no reward is promised, and still you must move forward. The path will not simply present obstacles. It is made of them. They do not appear as detours or misfortunes. They are the way. Each one is a silent gatekeeper asking, not if you are strong already, but if you are willing to become strong. Not if you are flawless, but if you have the will to keep rising in spite of your flaws. These moments are not peripheral to your journey. They are the journey, but that is the point. These are not interruptions to the path. They are the path. They are the curriculum of your becoming. These trials reveal your values, your resilience, your endurance. They draw out the grit of who you are beneath the image, beneath the roles, beneath the expectations. They show you what you hold sacred when everything else is stripped away. Every setback, every hardship is a mirror and a chisel. It reflects your present condition and shapes your future potential. Each difficulty carves out more space for wisdom, for resolve, for clarity. Through the ache of effort and the burn of persistence, you find out what you are made of, and more importantly, what you are willing to become. The fire doesn't destroy gold, it reveals it. The intensity of the heat removes what is false and leaves only what is true. And if you allow yourself to step into the heat again and again, you will emerge not as someone untouched by hardship, but as someone refined through it, your edges smoothed, your core strengthened. You will not be who you were before. You will be stronger, clearer, more grounded, more aligned. You will become someone who holds depth, who emanates quiet power, who does not need to prove anything because they have been tested and know who they are. You will be someone who knows the fire firsthand and still chooses to walk forward, not as a victim of adversity, but as its student. A student who has earned their wisdom, not through words, but through wounds healed into strength, and you are not here to avoid the flames. You are here to walk through them and rise, shining, reshaped, undeniable, not because you never faltered, but because you kept coming back, you kept showing up, you kept taking one more step when it would have been easier to sit down and wait for life to pass by, because every time you were tested, you chose not comfort, but courage. Not escape, but endurance. Not resignation, but revelation. And in that choice, you didn't just survive, you transformed, you stepped into your higher nature. You became someone the world cannot overlook, not because of your volume, but because of your presence. That is how you rise. That is who you become. Revisit your journal, circle the traits, decisions, and actions that reflect who you want to be. Then live them today, because this moment right now is your mountain and your soul was built to rise. Thank you for staying us until the end. Do subscribe to the channel I Am Stoic for more content like this.